Good morning and welcome to the Body Intelligence Summit. I'm Katie Hendricks and I'm going to be your host this morning for a very exciting session that I'm so happy to be sharing with you. We're going to be meeting with Anat Baniel, who, in my opinion, is a somatic superstar. She is the author of the best-selling book, Move Into Life, The 9 Essentials for Lifelong Vitality, and the highly acclaimed Kids Beyond Limits. She was trained as a clinical psychologist and dancer and was a student and then a close personal associate of Dr. Moshe Feldenkrais for many years. Her work is really on the forefront of so many fields, including the emerging brain plasticity field. She's going to be sharing with us how to use the 9 essentials that she's defined that help people powerfully change their brains. And she's worked with thousands of people, helping them to people of all ages, including high-performing musicians, athletes, business people, and others, to not only get rid of the aches and pains and transcend present limitations, but also to really open up to the possibilities of enjoying being in a vital, functioning body. She also, in addition to that, has created a real specialty in working with children with special needs, including autism, cerebral palsy, genetic disorders, ADHD, and other learning and developmental disabilities. One of the things that I so appreciate about Anat is her great generosity of spirit, and in that she has created a special offer for you all today, which is NeuroMovement, a way to powerful, vibrant, intelligent, and flexible body and mind, which is priced regularly at $219, and a special for this summit will be $97. You can find that link at bodyintelligencesummit.com/Anat, A-N-A-T, and I will be mentioning that also at the end of our session, and you can also find out a lot more about Anat at her website, anatbanielmethod.com. So, with all of that, welcome, Anat.
Hi, Katie. I'm so thrilled to be with you. It's always such a pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm going to dive right in because we have so many wonderful things to explore. So the first thing I really would like to have you address is, given what you know about the human brain, what do you see as really possible for people, both for the baby boomer generation and also for younger adults?
Well, I see really the possibility, in a nutshell, of a very vibrant life till the end, where every day, every week, each of one of us can do a little better, do something new, actually find ourselves improving as we get older rather than the expected typical deterioration. So that life can be really vibrant throughout life.
Wonderful. And what would that look like for, a regular person, someone sitting in an office, working long hours? What might that look like?
Well, I thought maybe we would start right away with a little movement demonstration that, just a few minutes. I have here my colleague, Dr. Neil Sharp, who is always happy to be a demo because he loves doing the movements and getting more vital. And people can try it right now to just feel the power of the brain to change in a positive way.
That sounds wonderful.
Is that good? So we're just going to go over here, and I'm going to give the instructions to Neil. This is Neil.
Hi.
And and I'm also going to demo on him. So anybody who's up for it, and to stand up. And one of the movements that we did a lot as children, and when people do, fitness programs and a lot of the yoga movements, require bending down and trying to reach the floor. And people find their hamstrings very often shorter than they would like them to be. So the first movement is just to bend the knees a little bit, so not to keep the legs straight, and then simply bend down as if to touch the floor, but no stretching, no pushing hard or stretching. Then come back up, and then again bend your knees gently, and just bend down gently and see just how far you go, because it's really a reference movement. And now stand up again. And now the next movement is bend your knees enough so that you can put your hands and lean on your thighs, just above the knees, with the elbows straight or almost straight. And then the movement to do is to round the back and pull the belly in and kind of look towards the belly button. And then the next movement is to arch the back gently and look up gently. Many, many adults find this movement already quite hard to do. So do it very gently, as much as is comfortable. We'll talk about why that's so important, to make it only comfortable. And then look up and see if you can get a little bit of an arch. The tail comes and the belly is pushed out. Maybe one more time to get it a little more clear. You pull the belly in, you look down, then you arch your back, you push the belly out so that the back can arch. You look up a little bit with your head, and now simply stand up. And first of all, give yourself a few seconds to feel what it feels like to stand, if there's any shift in how you feel. And now bend your knees a little bit and just go down towards the floor and see if you're going further. And you see Neil has gone further and he's not faking it. So now, so that's why he likes to be a demo. Now bend your knees again and put both hands on your right knee. And the movement that you're going to do now is the following. You're going to round your back and you're going to turn your head to peek under your right armpit. And then you're going to arch your back gently and you're going to look over your right shoulder as if you want to see the pocket of your pants. Again, just very gently, comfortably turn to peek under the right armpit and then turn to look over your right shoulder. Stand up, bend your knees a little bit, go down again, see if it's a little easier, and see if your right arm goes down a little more than your left one. Maybe yes, maybe no. Come back up. And now bend your knees a little bit, lean on both hands on your left knee, and now round your back and look under the left armpit, and then arch your back, free your belly, push the belly out. We're going to talk about that. Look over the shoulder, round, look under the armpit, arch, look over the shoulder, stand up, take a breath, bend your knees a little bit, and go down and see if you've gone further. And most good. Look at him, he's disappeared. So, I'm back here. Yes. So, what happened?
Yes. Well, one of the things that I really noticed is the emphasis on being gentle, moving in a kind of consideration and caring way with your body, which is totally the opposite of the no pain, no gain orientation that, you know, so many people have learned.
Absolutely. Well, in my understanding, and I'll talk about what you said, it's a beautiful observation, Katie, is that the brain changed. We didn't really, I mean, every movement we did, the first one we did 3 times, he did every other movement 2 times. He went gentle, so there's no stretching. The change is not mechanical. The change is in the brain. The way the brain informs the body to do what you're trying to do. And we need to get you out of the picture. She's wonderful. She's helping us. So how do we get the brain to figure out to do something better? So if we look at aging, one of the things that happens, we get stiffer, we get slower, it's harder to pull the movement together. And it really deteriorates the quality of life, the vibrancy, the sense of safety, the balance, all those things. Young adults want to get more fit and go about it, like you said, a lot of times with a lot of force, stretching, and actually damage themselves and reach a plateau because their brain needs the new information to put it together better. What I did with Neil, or what Neil did, is when he moves slowly, it gives him an opportunity to feel what he's doing. And the brain, in order to do anything, to pull anything together, needs information. And the information, the source of information, is when the brain perceives differences. Differences in sound, differences in sight, and differences in all our senses, including the kinesthetic sense, the proprioception. So if I move my arm and I don't feel what I'm doing, I have no control over it. And the finer my brain can notice what I'm doing, the richer the information it has to pull the action, the movement together. So slow allows the brain or us to feel what we do. It's so important to feel and to develop our ability to feel our own bodies, to be mindful. It's actually mindfulness in action, right? We reduce the force. These are already my essentials. As a second essential, subtlety, we can perceive differences better. Because when we use a lot of intensity of stimulation, a small change is absorbed. We don't feel it. We don't notice it. It's a physiological, actually, reality. So what I did with Neil is I guided him through a few movements that I knew the brain needs to feel in order to be able to go down and touch the toes, to let go of the hamstrings.
Beautiful. And what I'm hearing is such a contrast to how our culture operates, which was with this time urgency and seeing how many things that you can pack in. And I love the demonstration of what can actually happen. It's like the tortoise and the hare, that when you move more slowly, it gives you a chance to really discern and to be able to notice the contrast. And so I really appreciate you starting with that. And what it leads me to ask you about is how this is related to this to brain plasticity, which has become such a popular phrase. And I'd love to have you say more about that and whether that's a positive thing and how that relates to your work.
Wonderful. So, well, fundamentally, brain plasticity, or the other term neuroplasticity, is the name they've given to the fact, to the ability of the brain to change and the propensity of the brain to change in response to its experience. So while it was assumed and believed for many, many years that after a certain age the brain is pretty much the way it's going to be and there's not going to be change, and the only kind of change is loss, right? As we age, there's going to be loss. Back in the early 80s, late 70s, Dr. Michael Merzenich was the first one to come out with research that showed clearly the opposite, that adult brain can change. And the important things that sometimes now people don't bring into account, the change can be both positive and negative. So what is a negative change? The negative change is when we get habits, which we need. We really cannot live without habits. I mean, having language is a form of habit, right? We've learned it. Being able to roll out of bed, stand up, and walk in the morning. We rely on our habits. But what happens is, if we become too automatic and we don't do the other kind of plasticity, then I'll talk about in a minute, the brain really sort of loses the options and just sort of gets grooved in deeper and deeper into the habitual. And that's what we see with aging the way we used to think it has to be. So people become very rigid, and it's hard to change. It's hard to learn. It's and things just, and there's just continued loss, right, over time. That's the negative plasticity. So too much automaticity, too much routine, not just in movement. For me, you know, in my thinking, I cannot separate mind from body, thinking from movement and feeling. They all form and manifest simultaneously. and they're not really even interdependent. They're part of a whole. So they work together. So thinking gets very rigid for a lot of people. You know, I always tell people, you remember when you go home to visit your folks and you listen to them talk and it sounds exactly like the previous holiday and the previous holiday and the previous holiday? That's the rigidity in the thinking movement part of the cell. So that's the negative, is when we get too rigid, too automatic, and the brain loses its agility to create the new and to improve on itself and to optimize. The positive kind of plasticity is that we create the conditions where the brain takes the experiences that come in, like just what we did here, because people bend down, you arch your back, you round your back, but you don't get more flexible. But there are ways to do it where you do get more flexibles, and that's the 9 essentials. So positive brain change under certain conditions. I have worked with people into their late 90s with dramatic changes, no less than we just saw with Neil, and probably some people felt in themselves. So that's the whole field of brain change. And the big question is, how do we induce intentionally positive brain change?
Yes, that's the big question, and it leads me to ask you about something that you've said, that the brain is more of an information system than a mechanical system. And I wonder if you could speak to that, because we have so many myths about how the brain actually operates that I think especially your work is really turning upside down.
Absolutely. So we are familiar with our mechanical cells. Excuse me. As babies, our experiences are our arms move, our legs move, we push something, it goes away from us, we pull it, it comes close to us, we use more force, we get usually sometimes more outcome, we use less force, we get less outcome, and it becomes an unconscious model of how things work. We also experience things linearly, right? I do this, then this happens, I do this, and then that happens, sort of a cause and effect mechanical world that we live in. And it's a very powerful model that is very useful for a whole lot of things. But then we move into the brain. The brain is the largest known system in the universe. We're talking about trillions of cells that amongst themselves have an average between 5 to 20,000 connections. I mean, as close to infinity as we need to be. And so how does this system work? How does it do its thing? And as I said earlier, the brain, when we experience and we feel a difference, it induces the process that's called differentiation. Mm-hmm. And in the brain, an important element of differentiation is when one nerve cell grows shoots to connect to another brain cell, to another neuron, so it can start communicating with it. It's a very simplistic way of saying it. So when we create certain conditions that allow us to notice and feel and perceive differences more clearly, the brain goes like, oh, you know, like a baby can only do that after birth. Either flex the hand or let it go. All the fingers, flex or stop. And then at a certain point, all of a sudden the baby notices, because the fingers move unintentionally, but when the baby moves it, it's all together or let's go. And at a certain point, the baby notices that there's this versus this. And what do they do then? They go like point, point. They are so happy. They point, and it gets a lot of outcome. People laugh. Even you just remember your own children, right? People laugh and they go, oh, look at the baby. It's a genius. It's pointing. You know, and then it becomes a distinction and it gets control. It moves into the voluntary system. Now you put that, and then, you know, the other fingers, more or less, the thumb gets way in there. And then you put the child in front of a piano. And in the beginning, they bang. It's undifferentiated. But then, and if you get the person to feel, and we'll talk about those conditions, you can accelerate the process of learning and get people to accomplish a whole lot more. So that's the information system. So when you want, or I want to do something better, I need to talk to my brain. I need to give my brain what it needs to work with. And that's the perception of differences. And it's the way to perceive differences better, and we can get good at that. So imagine a person that walks through, I don't know, a room full of people and certain things happen, and they just don't notice it. There's no room for intelligence at that moment. So that's the difference between the mechanical and the information.
So I heard you say something that I'd like to have you come back to, which is the conditions for feeling. What are the best conditions for, anybody who's viewing this right now or who is viewing it, later on? What can they do right now to increase their ability to notice differences?
Absolutely, and I so love it that you say, and just want to contextualize it, like when people get older, their balance gets worse, right? Not everybody, but it's a very common problem. Mm-hmm. And people think, oh, because they're not strong. You see, it's the mechanical understanding. They lost their strength. Actually, what they mostly lost is the vibrancy of perceiving what's the information, the sensations that come from the soles of their feet. And because they don't feel what's happening with the feet, which means where the body is in space, right? As we move in space, it shifts the weights on the feet. The brain can't self-correct. And if they go a little over, too much past the center of gravity outside of the body, they just fall. And they're also not strong enough to block such a fall. But it's really the vibrancy of the brain, the ability to perceive differences. So that's an example. And so the first condition that I find kind of like it's the ground for everything else is what I call movement with attention. Movement, for me, in my understanding, is the language of the brain. There's more and more now theory. Katie, you've so been in that world for so long, and there's now theories that say that the only reason we have brains is because we move. We need brains because we move. And whether I know in the brunt of the brain, like estimated 96-ish plus or minus % of the brain is busy with organizing movement while we are awake. So this whole big system, the thinking, the feeling, everything is just organizing our action. Movement forms the brain. It's in childhood, if an arm doesn't move, it doesn't get represented in the brain, and the child will not have control over that arm. So, but movement alone, automatic movement, barely creates any new connections in the brain. It does not map the brain to the part that's moving. The moment we pay attention to what we feel as we move, the estimated number of new connections, that this differentiation I talked about, there's new opportunities for control of the body, 1.8 million new connections per second. It's about 100 million a minute. It's pretty cool. And that explains how the changes can be so rapid, just like I demonstrated with Neo. So movement with attention, where I listen to what I feel as I move. So if I have a teacher, I listen to the instruction, I pay attention to that, and then it becomes internal. So if I bend, or I am actually becoming interested in what I feel in different parts of my body as I move. And in a minute, I can do another demo with people how to use some of those essentials.
That would be great.
So you can just pay attention to how you pour your cup of coffee, what your right shoulder does when you do it, what your left shoulder does when you do it, what are you shifting weight on your feet, and then you leave it alone, and you'll find that your arms get lighter, that your thinking gets a little more clear. All of a sudden you solve problems better. Again, I work a lot with children, I also work a lot with adults. The kids get better grades in school, they can start reading and writing, their brain can do a better job. Same thing with adults. In our usual life, you know, and so on. Second essential that I'd like to mention, again, is slow. Slow, fast. We can only do what we already know. The way the brain is built is when we go fast, we have to survive, right? The brain's job is to keep us alive, keep us moving, keep us successful in our life. So if I go fast, the action, the movement, the thinking, everything gets hijacked by my habitual, because it's grooved in. It's faster. It's reliable. It has worked in the past. And these are the habits, and as I want to say again, they're very important. We want those habits. We want to be able to move fast. We want to be able to act automatically. I want to be able to drive and not wonder every second what I should do, right? But if I want to grow, if I want to be vital, if I want to age well, if I want to have a sense of well-being, a powerful essential is slowing down. So again, you do the movement, you pay attention, you slow down. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to slow down the whole day. You slow down for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, twice a day, and your brain is having a party. It goes like, thank you, I've got new materials to work with. I can do my job better.
That's so beautiful that you're saying, and what I wanted to underline is that what I hear and I experience just even being with you today is the pervasive curiosity.
Oh, yes.
That you embody. And I think one of the issues for modern men and women is that we've learned how to be so critical with ourselves and always be improving ourselves and looking at what's wrong. And what I hear that becomes available by practicing the kinds of things that you're talking about is a whole different way of being with yourself, which is giving curious attention to what you're noticing, and that in itself can help create more of mind and body intelligence.
Oh, hugely. I'm going to talk, but it's the same thing with adults, but with children, especially the little ones, you know, a few weeks old or a few months old, and I encourage parents to do the same, is to get interested in the child. And you have worked so many years with couples. The hunger to be seen. But it's not just like a quote-unquote psychological need. It's a biological need. I have found that when I or a parent gets attuned, connected, and interested in the other, in the child, everything I do with the child is amplified into remarkable positive outcomes. Same thing with adults. It's a condition. It's like, I'm interested. We're built to be interested. That's how we discern. That's how the brain notices differences. It doesn't look at, if I can feel the difference between perceive the difference between red and green, I will not see red and green, and I will not see color. I won't have the distinction. But if my brain can all of a sudden notice, you know, this versus that, or an open space versus a wall, I won't walk into the wall. I'll walk through the door. I mean, we depend on it. We don't even know how much we depend. And highly intelligent people and highly creative people are those who notice differences that nobody else noticed.
I love that you're saying that, Anat, that the giving your attention to, I mean, just giving your attention is in itself so valuable, but giving your attention to the subtle differences has a direct effect on your body and brain intelligence. And I'd love to hear you say more about that, and I want to make sure that we have time for another demo as well.
Absolutely. So I'll say maybe, I'll go quickly now because I think people are getting more the idea of perception of differences and the conditions for that. So the next condition for that is simply reducing the force. There's a physiological phenomena law called Weber-Fechner law, and that is that our ability to perceive a change in the intensity of stimulation is in inverse relationship, I'll explain this in a minute, to the intensity of the baseline. So if I'm in a dark room and you turn on a flashlight, I will see it right away. It'll startle me, right? But if I'm in this room and you are behind me, turned a flashlight, I probably wouldn't notice. Because there's too much ambient light, too much already baseline stimulation for me to notice the difference.
Yes.
Something with sound. Very loud sound, you talk to me softly, I won't hear it. It gets quiet, you'll whisper, I'll hear it. Same thing with sweetness, with saltiness, with taste, with smell. And the same thing is true when we talk about movement with the sensations we get from the joints and the muscles, the kinesthetic and proprioceptive, which is it's our sense, right? It's our sixth sense. So, and it's extremely important. We would not be able to control the body if we didn't know where it is in space and what we're doing with it, right? And the more power I put, so if I hold this bottle and I close my eyes and somebody put the paper and I didn't hear it, I wouldn't feel the difference. But if I hold this paper and you put on top of it this paper, I go like, oh my God, the weight just doubled. I can feel it. When we want to change our body, if we want to have an intelligent, vibrant body that goes like, oh yeah, we can do this easier and let's do it this way and be responsive and have good balance, we want to reduce the force with which we do things. And start training ourselves in the best ways, again, 5 minutes at a time. When you're picking up that cup, do you need to use that much force in your shoulder, or can you experiment with just picking it up, and how little do you need to use to get the outcome? Go on your treadmill, same story, slow it down so you don't fall off, right? Because you're going to be mindful and you can't just rush, and walk slower, reduce the effort. And that alone, slowing down, reducing the force and paying attention, I have seen transformations beyond belief, and they're practically instantaneous. And it's not me, it's the brain. It's giving it the vitamins it needs, right? It's giving it what it needs. The next one is variation. So one thing, variation, is I do something and then I do something completely different. A very powerful variation most people don't think about is doing the same thing in different ways. So that's what we did in the first lesson, right? That people just did. You stand up and you touch the floor. Then you stand up, you bend down, but you lean on your knees. You just changed it a little bit. And you pull the belly in, pull the belly out. We'll talk about that before the end, why to do that. But that's another variation. Then I ask you to look under the armpit and over the shoulder, and before you know anything, you're at least 30–40% improved. So these are 4 basic essentials, and I want to talk about 2 others, and then afterwards, after the demo, we can talk about the rest if you'd like. The next one that I put is enthusiasm. And for me, enthusiasm is not like huge excitement, which is a more childish way, but it's the willingness and the intention to delight in small changes. So if I could touch just halfway between my knee and my, my foot, and then I do a little variation, and I'm going an inch lower, I have at least two possibilities. One is to say, it's only an inch lower. It's not a big deal. I mean, I'm not touching the foot yet. The other one is to go like, oh my God, look how brilliant those 50 trillion cells of my body are, brain and everything else, is that I just did, 30 seconds and I'm an inch before. Let's keep going. I learned to do that specifically with my work with children. I really figured it out because I noticed that when a child starts changing and the parent is depressed and anxious and goes like, yeah, but they're not standing yet. Yeah, but they're not talking yet. Yeah, but they're fill in the blank. It's like putting a glass over a candle. The light seems to go out in the child, and it's much harder for the child to improve. But if the parent sits there saying nothing and internally goes like, oh my God, they've opened the fingers for the first time. For 3 seconds, but the fingers were clenched before because they had a stroke, or things like that. the child bounces forward enormously. And when I learned it really is when I had the same child with two different parents. And when one of them brought, had one kind of emotional setup, and the other one was the other one. And when the parent that was, and I don't blame the parent, but the parent that was very anxious and quote unquote negative would not delight in the changes, the child hardly changed. And the father would bring her the next day, and she would just ride forward in full speed. I found research, or actually Neil found for me research, that shows that our emotional feeling towards a person as they're doing something will change the brain one way or another. And what is enthusiasm? Is amplification of a difference. I choose to amplify small changes. And let me tell you, the only way to change is through many small changes. Because we always have to start where we are. We can't start somewhere else. So the celebration of the process, it's basically process-based. So and I know you understand that 100%, but the celebration of process. So these are 5 essentials. Movement with attention, slow, reduction of force, I call it subtlety, variations, and enthusiasm. And we can try another thing with that.
That would be wonderful. I'm just drinking in what you're saying on that, and I'd love for people to be able to participate in another demo. That would be great.
Yeah, we'll be brief, and it's going to be this time in sitting. So Neil, and tell us if you see Neil well. Yes. Perfect. Maybe a little bit more. That's it. Okay. So. So one of the movements that people lose as they get older, or when people are unwell or depressed, they also have a hard time doing it, is actually lifting the arm above the head. So when every person who wins the gold in the Olympics, what's the first movement they do? Arms up, right? And they run around, and they don't think about it, but the arms go up. What do children do when they get excited? Arms up, right? As people get older, the whole thing gets squished together, and the ability to do this is really reduced. And it has a lot of movement implications and emotional implications and vibrancy of thinking implications. So I'm going to do a little thing to make it easier for people to keep their arms, bring their arms up, and so on. So my request is to very slowly lift your arm up with the elbow a little bent, just to where it's comfortable. Remember, we're not forcing, to where it's comfortable. And maybe one time, take the arm up and bring the arm as high up as you can, as far as you can, and feel what it feels like. And I look at Neil and not nice. And now, just 2 or 3 times, lift the arm slowly, and as you lift it, feel what you feel in the arm, in the shoulder, in the length of your spine, and in your pelvis. And then go back down and do it again. And again, as you lift, feel where you feel movement in yourself. So obviously you feel movement in the arm, but anywhere else do you feel movement or not? That's the movement with attention. And I'm also expanding it a little bit further than the arm, so people don't just focus on the arm, because actually the brain has to account for the whole body all the time. Lift the arm up a little bit, and that's very good. Now, I'm going to ask I'm going to ask everybody to round their back, slouch. Just let gravity pull you down, and put your hand on your forehead. And now focus on your elbow. And what I'm asking you to do is to roll your pelvis forward, arch your back, and bring the elbow with the head up. And then bring the elbow down and round your back. And next time you do the movement, I'm demonstrating a Neil so it's a little clearer for people where I'm touching. Arch the back, bring the weight forward, free the belly, look up, and then round the back. Do that, and now let it go. Sit for a moment, just feel, by the way, whether the one shoulder is lower or wider, whether the weight goes differently between one hip or the other and the other. That means your brain is already reorganizing. The brain is already using the perception of difference, the information. And now, round it back a little bit, not much, and now begin lifting the arm and roll the pelvis forward and see if the arm lifts a little easier. And very often a little further. And now, what I'm going to ask you to do is to go down and lean. That's a variation. Lean on your left forearm. Once again, put your hand on your forehead. And now, again, round. Take the elbow a little down, but don't push hard. Don't push hard. And then it's a little harder. You're a little twisted. Keep leaning on the left forearm. And you see, so things go a little askew, and that's exactly what we want. We want a variation. And just feel your chest bone in front, feel your belly getting free, feel your rib cage, feel the length of your spine, what it's doing or not doing, and then sit in the middle. And now round your back a tiny little bit, and now bring the arm up, roll the pelvis forward, and feel what it's like.
Beautiful, Anat. That's such a great demonstration of the qualities that you were talking about. And as we're coming to the close of our time in a few minutes, I wanted to again mention the offer that you're making to our audience, which is your new NeuroMovements, which would be a way for people to practice exactly what you've been demonstrating today. And you can get the link for that at bodyintelligencesummit.com/Anat. So, and we really appreciate you making that offer available to people, because your work is just stunningly inspiring. And I want to appreciate you. What you call enthusiasm, we call appreciation. To really give a sense of, wow, look what's happening, wow. And for each of us to be able to have that kind of increased wow for ourselves and for others, the impact that has on others, is just one of the many brilliant things that you shared today. And one of the things we've been asking people who are presenting at the summit is, you know, given all that you've talked about, what's one thing that you could leave us with today that people could take with them to really increase their sense of body intelligence?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, that there are remarkable possibilities at any time, at any age, to get the brain to become more fully the brilliant brain you were born with, and have the brilliant self you were born to have. And it's not hard to do it. It's actually very available, and the moment you start, that's the moment you start getting changes and outcomes. And you know, my father is my model. He's 96 years old. He's taken my training. I work with him anytime I see him. He's on his third startup. He's a scientist. He's actually keeps inventing. Walks twice a day for an hour, hour and a half. He's older. He's 96, but the vibrancy, the fullness of his life, and those small, seemingly small changes actually are big shifts in the quality of the functioning of the brain, and they really make a difference. And all you have to do, and of course the offer has many movement lessons and lectures, so people don't have to invent it all themselves. And you take those ideas and bring it to, really, you can have a fabulous life. Everybody can have a very satisfying life.
What a lovely thing to leave people with, and also the demonstration of that we can keep living a vital life lifelong throughout our lives. And I love that you're sharing that, and I want to thank you again so much for being with us and sharing your generosity and the brilliance of your work. And so thank you, and I want to thank you all for being with us, and we're looking forward to the next session on the summit. So thank you.
And thank you, Kathy. Thank you so very much. Always a pleasure.